So what happens when a country's own army, its ultimate shield, is basically told that its real job isn't honor anymore, but making a profit? Today, we're diving into the absolutely explosive testimony of one man who spent 41 years inside the Moroccan military. He watched its soul get sold off piece by piece, and this is his story.
All right, let's just get right to the heart of it. This is the central claim from the man himself, Commandant Majube Tobji. He says that for 30 years, the very institution he gave his life to was, and this is his word, gangrened by corruption. Now look, this isn't some critic on the outside looking in. This is a diagnosis from someone who was right there, who saw the sickness spread from the very top down.
And to really get why this is so powerful, you have to understand the man. I mean, Majube Tobji wasn't just some soldier. He was basically born into the army. He even says he had, quote, chromosomes in fatigues. His dad was an artiller, a gunner, and his grandfather fought with legends. So for over 41 years, this was his entire world. This testimony, it's not just a report from the field, it's a family story, and that's what makes it hit so hard. So to really grasp how deep the fall was, we've got to start with what the army was supposed to be, what Toby believed in when he first signed up. And what Toby describes is like two completely different armies, a real tale of two eras. You had the old guard, right? The army he joined as a young man. That was all about integrity, duty, self-sacrifice. National honor was everything. But then came the new guard. And this new era was all about opportunism, greed, and building a personal fortune. It was a culture where, in his own chilling words, everything is for sale, even souls. So how does a culture like that just rot from the inside? Well, Tobji points to one single unbelievable moment, a piece of advice from the king himself that just changed everything. Okay, to get what's about to happen, you really have to understand the king's state of mind. Think about this. King Hassan II had just survived 2 assassination attempts by his own military in just 13 months. First, there's this bloody coup at his palace. Then, his own air force tries to shoot down his plane while he's in it. So you've got a monarch who has literally stared death in the face twice at the hands of his own men. He is, to put it mildly, deeply shaken. And this is the turning point. Imagine the scene. The king stands before his officers, the same kind of men who just tried to kill him, and he delivers this absolute bombshell. Tobji says it was a violent shock to hear it, because this wasn't just some friendly advice. It was basically a royal order. It was a green light to go out and get rich. In one single sentence, the king completely flipped the script on the army's mission. It wasn't about protecting the nation anymore. It was about protecting your own wallet. And with that one command, man, the floodgates just burst open. The king had effectively put his own army up for sale, and you can bet there was a new breed of officer ready to line up and buy. This order created a whole new kind of officer. Tobji calls him the affairist officer. And this guy, he wasn't really a soldier in the way you'd think. He was more like a businessman wearing a uniform, an opportunist who was way more focused on profit than on patriotism. And Tobji says the poster child for this new model, the guy at the very top, was the incredibly powerful and, deeply corrupt General Jalloumi. And just like that, corruption became the new normal. Suddenly, everything had a price tag. I mean, think about this. Tobji says top cadets, the best of the best, who used to fight for prestigious combat roles, were now choosing jobs in supply. Why? Because that's where you could manage the fruitful business of selling off army stuff. We're talking fuel, food, even trafficking camels across the desert wall. You name it, it was for sale. But this culture of greed, it wasn't just about lining pockets. No. During the long, brutal Western Sahara War, it started to have real life or death consequences for the soldiers on the front lines. And this really makes you ask a terrifying question, doesn't it? If you're a soldier out there in the desert, surrounded by danger, who's the real enemy? Well, according to Tobji, the answer is just devastating. The soldiers were fighting a war on 2 fronts. Out in front of them, in the desert, was the official enemy, the Polisario. But behind them, looking over their own shoulders, was an enemy that was maybe even more dangerous, their own corrupt command. Commanders who saw the war not as a national struggle, but as just another business opportunity. And the human cost of this, it's just staggering. Tobji tells these awful stories, like sending jeeps out into the desert with only 1 spare tire, making his own soldiers buy patch kits with their own money. He said troops were treated like prisoners in arms, just stuck in their positions, forbidden to move. Wounded soldiers, just abandoned. There was no real social service for them. And the dead, this is the worst part. Thousands were killed, and there were no official military cemeteries. Their skeletons, he says, were just left under the desert sand.
And this number, 2,300, that's how many Moroccan soldiers were taken prisoner. For Tabji, this wasn't just some unavoidable tragedy of war. No, he saw it as the direct result of a cynical leadership that cared way more about its profits than it did about the lives of its own men.
So after decades of seeing all this decay, Commandant Tabji's own story takes this final dramatic turn. Because when the most powerful man in the army suddenly dies, all the things Tabji knows, well, they become a very dangerous liability. Okay, check out this chain of events. January 1983, the infamous General Delaney dies in a very suspicious car accident. Tajabi was his right-hand man, so he knows way too much. So what happens? March 1983, he's lured into a trap, arrested, and he just disappears. He's held for 20 months in a secret prison, no charges, no trial, nothing. But his story doesn't end in a cell. In September 1984, he pulls off this incredibly daring escape that he planned himself, and he gets away to France, so he can finally tell the world everything he witnessed.
So in the end, Commandant Tabji's story, it's about more than just a corrupt institution. It really forces us all to ask a much bigger, more uncomfortable question. When the very people who are sworn to protect a country are driven by greed instead of duty, what is the real, true cost to a nation when its army's honor is for sale?